The frozen north of Conan Exiles is not normal. At first, it seems nothing more than your typical endgame biome with difficult conditions and fearsome enemies. However, even the very snow here may be unnatural, and today we'll be uncovering why. Our journey begins with a simple question: what happened in the north? As we see it now, this is a place of biting cold, a frozen hell loomed over by the ever-present volcano. How could this climate exist naturally? Well, it doesn't. When the Lemurians came upon the exiled lands, they saw it as a vastly different place. The Witch Queen describes the desert as a rolling grassland, something we covered in my previous video about the unnatural desert, but she also mentions the north in a small, easily overlooked passage.
In the north were mountains, but not the snow-covered mountains that we had seen on our journey. Just jagged, rocky peaks.
At the point of their arrival, the exiled lands had no snow. Furthermore, a later passage also reinforces that.
I began sending scouting parties far to the north, outside of the borders of the Giant King's kingdom. They were to find fertile lands that would not encroach upon the territory of our hosts.
Unfortunately, that is our only measure of evidence, but it is clear as day. When the Lemurians arrived, and even prior to the outbreak of war, the frozen north was, indeed, not frozen, but instead a place of rocky mountains, perhaps with fertile land. What happened in the north? To answer that question, we turn to the Giant Kings, the ancient keepers of these lands. Across the world, one will find lore stones, recordings of life beneath the thumb of the Giant Kings for the human slaves enshackled by the bracelet. They tell the purpose of the lands as they were then, the tasks of the slaves, and, importantly, helped to guide them through the landscape to their destination. One of the best hidden amongst them is the lore stone high above the Temple of Frost. Cloaked in icy clouds, this lore stone is very easily missed, but provides us great insight into the strange happenings below.
North of here, Bonded One, is a valley. Do not approach this place too closely. There was a clashing of sorceries here in the past, and it created a disjunction. Belief can be a powerful tool that shapes the will. In this place, belief can shape the world. If enough believe it to be so, the gods themselves can manifest. This is too much for mortal minds to handle. Stay away from the disjunction, child of the bracelet. Stay safe, and serve another day.
That is what happened in the north. A great clashing of sorceries created something terrible, a great arcane unknown, the Disjunction. However, that only creates more questions. Firstly, what exactly is the Disjunction? Its name means the act of disjoining or the condition of being so, which further means something that is unconnected or detached. In this context, we can assume the Disjunction is detached perhaps from this plane of reality. Cold winds whip from the portal, and the exile cannot interact with the Disjunction, so how did it create the frozen north we know now? To answer that question, we return to the lore stone.
Belief can be a powerful tool that shapes the will. In this place, belief can shape the world. If enough believe it to be so, the gods themselves can manifest.
What exactly does that mean? It's fairly cryptic, but I read that as meaning that the Disjunction is, in some form, a catalyst. The beliefs of those around it can manifest reality through the portals, but that causes yet another quandary. The frozen north is unlike most other biomes in the exiled lands, in that there are practically no human settlements, only beasts and frost giants. The only sign of a settlement is Zulan, which itself is now overrun with undead and was taken by the Silent Legion at some point during the Lemurian uprising. Who would have been here to manifest belief through the Disjunction? The answer perhaps lays in Islet Lake. If one walks the surface, the ghosts of those trapped beneath the ice will fade into being. Whether these were residents of the biome or simply travellers is unclear, but they seem at least part of the likely culprits. Ymir, the Lord of War and Storms, is a deity worshipped primarily by the people of Asgard and Vanaheim, areas of Nordheim, given that it's unclear who exactly lived in the tundra and highlands prior to the formation of the Disjunction, or if it was purely under Giant King control. We can't be certain who thought of Ymir, but judging by the bodies in the lake, it appears that at least some small group must have done so. That is, assuming it was not caused by something on the other side of the portal, thinking of the god of the Nordheimers. Were those in the lake to travel into the frozen north after the clash, with the image of Ymir in their mind, perhaps the Disjunction may have seen fit to manifest it. In a sudden rush of sorcery, the Disjunction blew harsh ice winds, a snap freeze coating the lands in snow. Frost giants, the sons of Ymir, stepped forth from the portal, born of the human belief. The lands were rendered uninhabitable to most, the perfect frozen realm for the frost giants to construct their temple of frost, their great statues of Ymir, and their outposts across the icy wastes. With those mysteries mostly uncovered, even more questions remain unanswered, and though I hate to say it, I'm not entirely certain there are answers for them. The first is, of course, when exactly did this happen? Our best source of the pre-sandstorm landscape is the map room. The Giant Kings use this structure to move slaves around their kingdom, and thus the geography represents the state of the exiled lands during the Lemurian uprising. The Giant Kings did not take slaves until the start of the war, but may have had human workers on their side beforehand, and though the timeline is unclear of what year the war itself started in, we can be relatively sure the map room was created either just before or just after the start of the war. On this structure, the desert is still mostly grassland, but the north is already frozen. That surely means that at some point after the Lemurians arrived, but before the end of the Lemurian uprising, this clash of sorceries happened and the north was embroiled in snow. Secondly, what exactly were the sorceries that caused the Disjunction to form, and who cast them? That is, unfortunately, a much harder question to answer. We know the Giant Kings reached this far north given the presence of the Lawstone, but so did the humans given the presence of the outpost of Zulan. We also know the Lemurians had access to fearsome sorceries given the battle at the Shattered Springs. Whether it was the sorcery of the Giant Kings alone, a battle between the Lemurians and the Giant Kings, or a conflict of magic between the Serpentmen and the Giant Kings is unclear, and this is where I'd like to invite your input. My personal theory is that the Giant Kings were perhaps testing sorceries that went wrong, given the presence of the obelisk nearby, in an area that slaves were explicitly warned against visiting. However, there is little evidence for any group here, so again, I'd like to know what you think. I did see a theory that the Disjunction portals bear some similarities to those in the Well of Skelos, which are both notably different from the portals created by the Lemurians in the Sunken City. Whether that's too relevant or not, I'm not 100% certain. Finally then, where exactly does the portal lead? One would suspect the far northern mountains of Nordheim, given the presence of frost giants, but something else exists that gives us a lot more context. Black ice seems innocuous at first, but the item description tells us a lot more. Substances in the outer dark have a material, but not of any composition that follows earthly laws. One of sorcerous intent can pull forth some of these weird substances, such as black ice. The presence of black ice denotes connection to the outer dark. This is a realm outside of earthly bounds where live gods and demons, a place of much darkness, and where some draw their sorcerous power from. The Giant Kings themselves are no strangers to this place.
Slave, this is the place of summoning. You are here to maintain the integrity of the Circle and clean up the reagents used by the Masters. The rituals that the Priest King and his acolytes perform here are messy, but pay them no mind. The whisperings of those who come from the outer void can have a disturbing effect on the weak-willed. We have not forgotten our origin, slave, nor the immensity of the void. Nightly, the Star Dreamers search the heavens for their wisdom, and at midnight, a moonbeam messenger carries the whispered dreaming back to the Warmaker, the Archivist, and the Priest King.
The presence of this material tells us of the Disjunction's connection to the Outer Dark, but also potentially points to the Giant Kings again as the cause of the Disjunction, given their pre-existing link to the Outer Dark and many dealings with the strange beings beyond the void. So let's bring it back to the original question as we summarise. What happened in the north? It was once a mountainous and potentially fertile land, one in which the Lemurians sought space for new settlements in which to raise their young. After the uprising began, some clash of sorcery occurred in the north, possibly at the hands of the Giant Kings. This tore open the Disjunction, a passage between here and lands unknown facilitated by the Outer Dark, which itself breathed frigid air into the north. The lakes froze, the sky grew heavy and the air plagued by snow, and the frost giants stepped from the portal to claim the newly frozen north as their own. As for their intentions, or if they are cognizant of their own aims beyond just plain survival, that is up for debate. Perhaps the frost giants knew not to think too deeply beside the Disjunction, lest they summon something more than frost and snow. I think that is a topic we could potentially cover in another video. However, that will about wrap us up for today. The frozen north of Conan Exiles is, much like the desert, unnatural, created through arcane means, perhaps even by accident. Many things in the exile lands are not as they seem, and I intend to document it all, so make sure you subscribe to follow the journey. Some of this video is theory work over circumstantial evidence, so if you have an alternative take, I would love to hear it in the comments. Thank you for watching, and of course a massive thanks to our wonderful esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. If you want to see videos early and support the channel directly, consider joining us on Patreon, link in the description and pinned comment. Take care, and I'll see you soon.